I hate the whole human race. I get a kick out of hurting people. I have no desire to change, and I know I never will. These were the chilling words of Carl Panzram, one of the most dangerous and unrepentant men in American criminal history. Where others denied or deflected blame, Panzram didn't just confess, he took pride in the destruction he caused. He saw humanity as rotten, and made it his mission to show the world just how dark one person's hatred could go. Welcome to InsightWave, the channel that delves into both solved and unsolved cases from around the world. If you haven't already, please take a moment to like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest crime stories delivered straight to your inbox. In today's video, we explore the twisted life and mind of Carl Panzram, a man who spent his life behind bars, who committed brutal acts across multiple countries, and who wrote a full confession from his prison cell, admitting to crimes so disturbing they were hard to believe. He claimed to have ended more than 20 lives, committed countless violent assaults, and deliberately set out to cause as much suffering as possible. And unlike most, he wanted the world to hear every word of it, in his own handwriting. This is not just the story of a criminal, it's a look into what happens when hatred, violence, and a total lack of remorse come together in one human being. This is the story of Carl Panzram. Carl Panzram was born on June 28, 1891, in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, into a poor German immigrant family. One of several children, Carl's early life was shaped by hardship. His father eventually abandoned the family, leaving his mother to raise the children alone in brutal, unforgiving conditions. By the age of 7, Carl was already drinking heavily and stealing, a child left to raise himself in a world that had already failed him. He was angry, distrustful, and defiant. As he later put it. I was a dirty little kid, and I didn't trust anybody. Why should I? I had never met anyone who didn't hurt me. At 11 years old, he was arrested for the first time. Shortly after, he was sent to the Minnesota State Training School in Red Wing, a place meant to reform troubled boys. But according to Carl, it was a place of abuse, humiliation, and cruelty. From the time I was 11 years old until I was 15, I was in that hellhole they called a training school. They beat me, tortured me, and used me like an animal. He described how staff subjected boys to degrading punishments, including beatings in a place they called the paint shop, where children were whipped until they bled. He would later reflect. There I was, being taught by example to hate, to steal, to fight, and to kill. And I learned it all well. Released a few years later, Carl was no longer a child, and he no longer cared about right or wrong. He was filled with rage, determined never to let anyone have power over him again. I was a liar and a thief. That's the way I was taught, and that's the way I lived. He began drifting from town to town, riding freight trains, stealing weapons, breaking into homes, and assaulting strangers. By his mid-teens, he was already becoming the man he'd later describe with chilling honesty. When I left that place, I knew I was never going to be good. I didn't want to be. After leaving Red Wing Reform School, Carl Panzram was done pretending to be part of normal society. Any trust he may have had in people, law, or morality had been completely destroyed. By his own account, he didn't just plan to survive, he planned to strike back. Still just a teenager, Panzram began drifting across the United States by hopping freight trains, living the life of a hobo in the early 1900s. But unlike others just looking for work or food, Carl was already consumed by violence. He robbed homes, assaulted strangers, and stole anything he could carry, money, guns, even bicycles. By age 15, he had already served time in a county jail. By 18, he was in and out of military stockades, and by 20, he'd enlisted in the U.S. Army, under a false name. Unsurprisingly, it didn't last long. He was court-martialed and imprisoned at Fort Leavenworth for stealing from the military. Panzram would later write that prison didn't reform him, it hardened him even further. He spent time around violent men, learned to navigate prison politics, and developed an even deeper hatred for authority. I was always a rebel and a criminal. Prison didn't change that, it sharpened it. After his release, Panzram began using dozens of aliases and traveling extensively. Between 1908 and the early 1920s, he committed burglaries, arsons, and brutal assaults in states across the U.S. and even overseas, including in Africa, Portugal, and South America, some while working aboard merchant ships. It was during this time that his crimes escalated from theft and assault to sexual violence and murder. Panzram later claimed that by the early 1920s, he had already killed multiple people, mostly strangers lured, attacked, and left behind without a trace. He wrote about these acts with shocking calm, often blaming his victims and showing no remorse. "Whenever I had the chance, I robbed, raped, and killed. I did it because I liked it." He also admitted to burning churches, assaulting sailors, and setting homes on fire just to watch them burn. He wasn't trying to get rich. He wasn't even trying to avoid arrest. He simply enjoyed chaos and destruction. "I believe the human race is not worth saving. I've made it my mission to show them what they really are." By this point, Carl was no longer just a career criminal. He had become something else entirely, a self-declared enemy of humanity, fueled by bitterness, trauma, and a desire to inflict suffering wherever he went. And yet, despite all this, he had barely begun. By the early 1920s, Carl Panzram had left a trail of destruction across multiple states, and even continents. He used dozens of fake names, robbed homes, committed assaults, and claimed to have taken over 20 lives, though authorities suspect there may have been more. But it wasn't a murder that finally brought him down. It was a burglary. In 1928, Panzram was arrested for breaking into the home of a wealthy man in Washington, D.C. While in custody, he began speaking freely, almost too freely. What began as a routine arrest quickly spiraled into something far more disturbing. He confessed to crimes across multiple states and countries, many of which had never been solved. He talked about rapes, murders, arsons, and assaults, describing each event with terrifying detail, and no trace of shame. "I have no conscience, so that does not worry me. I don't believe in man, God, nor devil. I hate the whole damned human race, including myself." Detectives were stunned. Panzram admitted to killing sailors in Angola, murdering boys in New York, assaulting men on freight trains, and burning churches just for fun. He claimed that if he were ever released, he would kill again, and again. His words weren't frantic or boastful. They were calm. Measured. As if he were reading from a diary. Panzram eventually wrote his entire life story by hand, in a 20,000-word confession while incarcerated. The writing was violent, bitter, and raw, but also articulate, clear, and direct. His literacy, given his background, was surprising. But his message was unmistakable. "I am not ashamed of anything I've ever done. I'm only sorry I couldn't do more." The confession was addressed to a prison guard named Henry Lesser, one of the few people who showed him basic kindness. Panzram agreed to write it not as a cry for help, but as a testament to his hate. He made no legal appeal. No request for mercy. He said he wanted to die, and he wanted it to be soon. In 1930, Carl Panzram was sentenced to death. While awaiting execution at Leavenworth Penitentiary, he assaulted a fellow inmate and later killed a prison worker, a final act of violence to ensure there would be no delay. When the day came, Panzram refused to let the guards restrain him. He walked to the gallows on his own and stared down the executioner with a sneer. His final words were, "Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill 10 men while you're fooling around." On September 5, 1930, Carl Panzram was hanged at the age of 39. He never expressed regret. Not once. Carl Panzram died as he lived, defiant, violent, and unrepentant. But his story didn't end at the gallows. In the years following his execution, Panzram's chilling handwritten confession, 20,000 words written while on death row, became a rare and disturbing document in the study of violent psychology. Unlike many serial offenders who lie, deny, or attempt to rationalize their crimes, Panzram was brutally honest. He didn't want sympathy. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He told the world, in his own words, exactly who he was. I am rage personified. I am the spirit of hate incarnate. For criminologists, psychologists, and historians, his writings offer an unfiltered look into the mind of a man shaped entirely by violence, abuse, and systemic failure. He wasn't merely evil in the cartoonish sense, he was a man made bitter and dangerous by a lifetime of betrayal, pain, and punishment. Some experts believe Panzram suffered from antisocial personality disorder, marked by extreme impulsivity, lack of empathy, and total disregard for human life. But even that label feels too clean for someone so deeply committed to destruction. If I had 1,000 lives, I'd use them all to do the same again. His life forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Did the world create Carl Panzram, or did it merely unleash him? Can a person be born broken, or are they forged through suffering? Even today, Panzram is studied in criminal psychology courses and is cited in discussions about prison reform and juvenile justice. He's the embodiment of what can happen when cruelty is met with more cruelty, a system that doesn't rehabilitate, but amplifies the very violence it claims to stop. And yet, perhaps the most haunting part of Carl Panzram's story is this. He told us the truth. We just didn't want to believe someone like him could exist, until he proved it. Carl Panzram didn't ask for redemption. He didn't want understanding. He wanted the world to know exactly what he had become, and why. Whether you see him as a product of abuse, a man born without conscience, or a symbol of what unchecked cruelty can create, one thing is certain. His story is not easily forgotten. Thank you for watching this deep dive into one of the most disturbing, and brutally honest, figures in true crime history. If you found this case thought-provoking, or if you have thoughts about Carl Panzram's legacy, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you think he was born evil, or made that way? Subscribe to InsightWave for more chilling true crime documentaries, from unsolved mysteries to the darkest corners of the human mind. Stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.